The battle over who will lead our country next is in full swing, with a Liberal leadership decision that will be revealed next Sunday and a federal election expected soon after. And for the first time in a long time, the Conservatives and Liberals are neck and neck. Tonda McCharles, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Bob Fife, the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau Chief. Welcome to you both. Great to have you.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Well, we are gearing up for the big, exciting Liberal leadership race. It has been an interesting campaign. I think, Bob, a lot of people think they know who's going to win this and that it's going to be Mark Carney. What's your take on what we should expect?
Yes, it's going to be Mark Carney. I mean,
No
and we've pretty much figured that was going to be the case from the get-go because the party lined up behind him. Something like more than 80 Liberal MPs, more than half the cabinet, including the finance minister, the foreign affairs minister. I mean, they're all supporting him. He's raised, I guess, now almost $4 million compared to something like $600,000 for Chrystia Freeland. So this is over, but the Liberals are not stupid. They saw the polls. He was the potential leader to have the best chance of beating Mr. Poilievre, and guess what? That has proven to be the case because the polls show a really narrowing of the race between the Conservatives and the Liberals, and in some polls, the Liberals actually leading ahead. So it's a whole new ballgame, and we're going to very quickly after the Liberal leadership go into an election campaign, and it's going to be a tough one to say who's going to win.
Tonda, what did you think of the various campaigns as you watched them unfold?
I mean, it would have been nice for the race to have been longer to both get a deeper look at all the candidates and their policies. That's in an ideal world. It would have especially been a better thing for the Liberals if they had road tested Mark Carney quite a bit more before we are plunged into a federal election campaign, because he has weaknesses on the political retail politics side that I think might come back to bite him
what do you
during
think some
a
of those
campaign.
weaknesses
Well,
are?
he's not a great communicator, either in a big room lifting a speech off the page or really in a debate stage. And I think that his French is poor, and he will face a really strong competitor in Pierre Poilievre, both on the campaign trail and on a debate stage. So the Liberals could have benefited, but look, I think that Bob's right. The indicators show he's got it now, and it's in the party's interest, I think, to stake out some pretty clear ground before a campaign. Because guess what? The Liberals, or rather the Conservatives, have a ton of money that they can spend framing Mr. Carney further before a campaign. So if there isn't an immediate campaign, they're going to throw millions at it.
Bob, I mean, obviously Mark Carney, front runner. The big thing's going to be, hey, Mr. Carney, you're not elected. That's the attack if you're Pierre Poilievre. How quickly do you think he's going to call an election to try to potentially, A, head off those attacks, and B, the reality that, Canadians are going to want to choose their leader, that leader may want a mandate, and he's going to have a bit of a bump that you always have when you first get elected, or at least elected as a leader, not as a member of Parliament?
Well, look, I think that the election will happen before the House comes back on March 24th. And for the reasons that you've cited, the Tories have a lot of money, and they're going to try to define him in advertising, which they've been putting out right now. So they don't, during a writ period, you're limited in how much money you can spend. So they don't want to have subject Mr. Carney to, a whole series of very expensive negative ads from the Tories, and it also, they've got to take advantage of the bump that they have right now, because there are weaknesses in Mr. Carney for sure. Look, you can't take away his record as a financial expert. Bar none. I mean, look, Bank of Canada, Bank of England. He's dealt with major crises, and that's the thing reason I think the polls showing such a narrowing, because he's the guy that potentially could deal with Donald Trump and the economic fallout from tariffs. But he's got weaknesses. I mean, in a French debate with Mr. Blanchet, the BQ leader, and Mr. Poilievre, they'll eat him alive. And he's not a good debater either. So when you put him in an English debate, Poilievre and Blanchet as well, even though his first language is French, they're very, very good debaters. And he has some real fault. We've seen already he says that he wasn't the chair of Brookfield Asset Management when they moved their headquarters to New York. Well, guess what? He was when they approved it.
He wrote a letter supporting
it. He still hasn't told us what he's going to do, and we've been trying to get this information on what you're going to do about putting your conflict of interest disclosures to the public. They have ducked that over and over again, and there's a reason for this. Is that it takes 60 days to declare, once you become Prime Minister, 60 days to declare your conflict and 120 days to declare it to the public. If he abides by that, then the election will be over before we'll even know what his financial interests are. So he's been ducking us a lot. He'll take 2 questions, maybe 3, and then they run away from us. So he's got a lot of great credentials, but he's retail politics. The jury's out.
You know, and I think a lot of folks, we all have been in Ottawa long enough that we remember Mark Carney, the bank governor. He was a very charismatic guy. Used to walk down Sparks Street, used to sit down with tables of journalists and chat people up. The Carney we've seen on the campaign trail hasn't always been that person, but he's still by far doing the best. The Tories have undergone a huge drop in the polls.
That's right.
Is this a Mark Carney factor? Is it a Donald Trump factor?
Or is it a Justin Trudeau factor?
Or is it a Justin Trudeau factor?
Right? I mean, Justin Trudeau drove a lot of the antipathy towards the Liberals. And Justin Trudeau's exit off the political stage has coincided with not just the rise of Trump and his tariff threats and his annexation threats, but you know, it's allowed Canadians to coalesce not just around any political party, but around a patriotic sentiment. And I think that's a game changer here. Justin Trudeau's exit is a game changer. And if a fresh leader comes in for the Liberals, it's pretty clear from all those polls, dramatic turnaround. People are considering voting for the Liberals again, which is, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago was astonishing. No one contemplated it. The NDP voters seem to be flocking to the Liberals. Even in Quebec, there's a sea change in terms of where Quebecers are going. You know, suddenly support for sovereignty has dropped. You know, Quebecers are identifying with the Canadian national cause. So this is extraordinary. I think the political situation is fluid, very dynamic, very volatile. I think the polls even are trying to catch up to public sentiment.
Bob, the Tories for a long time, when you tried to raise with them some of, you know, Mr. Poilievre's tone or some of the attack dog stuff he would do, they believed it was very successful. They believed Canadians were comfortable with it. Others said, no, I think this is a factor of people just not liking Trudeau. Do you think this drop in the polls is going to change their calculation on their tone in public and their approach, or do you think that they continue down the same path?
Well, it should change their tone, but you know, we're not seeing it, are we? He's still being the partisan nasty instead of trying to come across as prime ministerial and presenting policies. He has a lot of good policies. In fact, the Liberals are stealing their policies as they move to the centre. But he's got to be talking to Canadians on one-on-one and not to have this sort of, you know, angry partisan stuff that reminds people of Donald Trump. They've got to get away with this juvenile talk about carbon tax Carney. I mean, stop it. It's very juvenile, and you know, here you are of a serious guy like Carney, who has led major central banks, and you're acting like you're in a schoolyard, taunting somebody as carbon tax Carney or sneaky Carney. I don't think that's very effective with maybe it's effective with the base, but it's not effective with a larger swath of Canadian voters. I think this is a time for maturity.
Here's where I think we've seen an attempt at a tonal shift by Pierre Poilievre. You haven't heard him say Canada is broken in the same way he was repeating that slogan for several months, to a couple of years basically, since he was elected Conservative leader. And so I think while he has not pivoted off his policies, he's trying to make a pivot off the tone that Canada is broken and shift to a message, his Canada First message, while it, you know, harkens back to both Stephen Harper's defense strategy in 2008, it harkens back to Laurier's line about Canada and trying to capitalize on that patriotism we just talked about. But he believes, I think fundamentally, and as do many of his supporters, that the policies that got him to where he was say 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago in the polls, will get him to the finish line in a campaign. So I don't see a pivot off the policies as much as a reframing of them tonally and branding them as Canada first.
Bob, final word to you.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, and here's the one thing. We're going to have an election in the next couple of weeks. Elections really do matter. You know, whoever can present themselves to Canadians, convince them that they're going to make the country better and can take on Donald Trump will win. It may be Mark Carney, but it easily could be Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives, because we've had 10 years of Liberals, and it's going to be fun to cover. I'm looking forward to it.
We're all going to be in the middle of that three-ring circus, but enjoying every second of it. Thank you both so much for coming.
Thanks, Mercedes.